Unit 6, summing up. Introduction of the prose, age, system and social necessity, using critical and scientific methods, growth and development of English prose. Early period, from Renaissance to the historian period, 17th century prose, historian to the Romantics, 18th century prose, 19th century prose, 12th century prose, present day prose. Difficult words, answer to check for his summary exercise for. Okay, here the aim of the prose. The first aim of the prose is to convey information and to make the meaning of the perfectly clear. The writer to convey his information exercises all his ability and all his intelligence. He use language appropriate to his subject. Most selfless care in choosing words, phrases, and idioms that present his thoughts with precision and accuracy to attain a prose style that conveys information with greatest accuracy, priority, and calm has been the chief object of the very great writer form, that of quantity, quantity, antiquity down to our own day. The writer of English prose from Alfred onwards. In their endeavor and advisors to achieve this end have from generations to generation followed different passions. These passions have varied according to the varying changes of popular taste. But amid all their varieties, they display two main characteristics. The one is the characteristics of what we call the periodic style, and the other the characteristics of the
loose conversational style, age, custom, and social necessity. Every great writer, whether he chooses to express himself in the elaborate periodic style or in the loose conversational idiom, aims at accuracy and precision. He must also endeavor to make his style perceive since his accuracy, presence, and appropriations will fail on of their object unless he can persuade people to read his words or to listen to them. It is in the quest of their grace and persuasiveness that the great writer of English prose have followed the periodic or the loose system of sentence structure. Following one of their other system, the writer always endure, endured, endure to express himself in his style that he knows the majority of his contemporaries will understand and appreciate. He must, if he is to persuade people, conform to the popular taste of his generation. Popular taste varies from generation to generation. So we find what would otherwise be a strange phenomenon in literacy, art, and expression, a recurring change or very regular intervals from the elaborate and periodic style to the simple and controversial and from the simple style back to the periodic. Hence, we meet in some periods of literacy prose which appears to us to sacrifice the qualities of the appropriate or the persuasivity at, at times both in its quest of persuasiveness, creative, critical, and scientific needs. The 12th century is an age of experiments in every branch of art and science. Prose style also it has occasionally tried to set up new standards. Interjectional word groups that lack syntax are used with an earnest that would make Lawrence Stern smile. Some of the writers of the 12th century prose seems to take a delight in heaping towards words in a way that effectively conceal the thought, if there be any behind them. But in the main, the writer who have achieved the greatest eminence have been content to tread the well-worn path, paths that their preceders trod. They show perhaps a greater readiness to blend the periodic with the conversational style, even as they are quicker than their preceders to flick the essence of tragedy out of the passing cal- kaleidoscope of apparent bliss. They have learned to the full the value of that subtle play upon the meaning and the sound of words that Stevenson, their great maestro, showed them so triumphant triumphantly. Their sentences generally are shortened, short compared with those of their presiders, and they often seek by a paragraph to achieve effects that in earlier days writers should have eased in a sentence. It is although the analytical tendency that has been at work from Anglo-Saxon days in the texture of the language itself is now showing itself in mistakable form in the structure of its prose. Growth and development of English prose, early period, verse. Verse is older than prose because verse begins easier to memorize, can develop in an oral culture while prose must be written down. The Anglo-Saxon who invaded Britain in the 55th century brought with them an advanced art of poetry. Even when the coming of the Christianity late in the 16th century led to literacy in Latin and English verse was still the normal medium, prose the exception, and verse predominated at all levels of literature. Throughout the Middle Ages, most medieval prose was very simply written and served very few purpose. Prose was our chronicles for sermons and books of religious instruction and for translation from Latin, or that to form French conquest of England in 1066 from French. There is none the less continuous tradition of prose in English. From the time of being King Alfred to the Renaissance, towards the end of the Old English period, two churchmen at Frick dated 1020 and Wolf- Wolfson wrote decade 1023. D means decade. In prose, which is still admired by those who read Old English. Middle English prose is most successful when the author thrusts his ear from the spoken language and written acts he might have killed. It is in such passage that we see most clearly that there was a threat of continuity uh, in style even in the biggest period of the history of prose. The anonymous mystical cloud of unknowing about 1400 in a good example. William Laxon, William Coxlon, 1421-91, who introduced printing from the content in 1476, was also a translator for the French who wrote a confident, smooth prose. Prose style was beginning to improve in the 15th century. From the Renaissance to the Restoration period. You can be asked this for the exam point of view. So please see that you read this and listen this properly. In the 16th and earlier 17th century, there was a steady 1560 onwards and rapid expansion of prose. Prose was used for the first time for a wide variety of purposes. There were still translations and sermons, but also historians, criticisms, characters, sketches, travels books, fictional narratives, if not yet novels, and of course plays. The growth of the printing industry in the London is the last decade of the century proceeds course of stories, romances, essays, and histories in a very wide varieties of styles. All prose was experimental. There was ample scope for creative writing. William Shakespeare, 1564-1616, was the greatest imaginative prose writer of the time. The art of his verse, dramatic prose, has taken first place in the study of Shakespeare. 17th century prose. In the period between the accession of King James I in 1603 and the restoration of the monarchy in 1660 may distinguish prose writers created thesis forms which built on the work of the 16th century hookers John Donne, Langston, Andrews Jeremy Taylor and the poet John Milton, 1608-74. Francis Bacon, first Baron Verulam and Viscount St. Albans, was a lawyer, a scientist, and a prose writer on worldly and practical matters in Latin and English. He published a book of essays, the first ever written in English in 1597, with the enlarged edition in 1612 and 1625. Historian to the Romantics. See, this can be asked for your exam as a note. Write a short note on historian, historian to the Romantics period. So here you can at least go through or listen this or read this and try to write it during your exam. Charles II, restored to the throne in 1660, granted a right in 1662 to the Royal Society for the discussion of the science and philosophy. The advance of the science is one key to understand the last decade of the 17th century and especially the reform of prose which was encouraged by the Royal Society. Bacon has argued that inductive method in sense could give man control over nature. There was scientific revolution in England in the decade that followed. The chemist Robert Boyle and the physicist Isaac Newton. It's not physicist, it's a physicist. Okay. L is wrongly mentioned over there. Physicist Isaac Newton were the members of the Royal Society. Men of letters. Men of letters also belonged to the Royal Society, including the poet, playwrights, and John Dryden, and others decided that since England Europe in the new scientific age, English prose needed to be reformed. Jonathan Swift (1667 to 1745) is the most effective author of plain, clear, readable prose, and he had the skill to make full use of the maturity English prose and attained by the time. In autobiographies, in letter writing, in travel books, in essays, confessions, in all first person works of literature, a new prose style developed in the early 19th century and has flourished ever since. The key of the change in point may be found by the essayist Charles Lamb. See, essayist is the word which is mentioned and rarely used and firstly found in during your English syllabus. Essay you have seen, but essayist and also the name Charles Lamb is also been mentioned. So please see, as we have gone through physicist Isaac Newton. So in that way, this person, Charles Lamb, what he discovered, the key to change the point may to be found by the essayist Charles Lamb. In 19th and 20th century, magazines, one of the achievements of the Victorian novel was to create a prose poetry from city life. Charles Dickens, you have gone through in 1852, was best at this. Polite reasonableness was the theme of Joseph Addison and Richard Stelly in their periodicals editions offered a model to writers of the mid 18th century. Letter writing became an art, especially when practiced by writers such as Horace Walpole and Leigh Mary Worthy Monlonga. Monlo- Monlonga. Oliver Goldsmith is the best known today of for his poem The Deserted Village 1770, his play She Stoops to Conquer 1773, and his sentimental story The Vicar of Wakefield 1776 became famous. He wrote history, biographical essays. Dr. Johnson Edward Gibson gave a grace and lightness of touch to 18th century prose. The rise of the novel was made possible by the new prose of the Restoril- Restorilian. Samuel Richardson, Henry Fielding, Daniel Defoe were the famous 19th century imaginative prose writers. Expansion and diversity are the marks of Victorian's prose, and no summary can do just to either. 18th century prose, romantic writer who felt that 18th century writing was par- parasite instead, that prose without imaginating regular meter of verse can have all the other qualities of poetry. They wrote elaborate art prose of prose poetry, which is imaginary, complex, and adventurous in rhyme. in rhythm. 18th century prose, romantic writers who felt that 18th century writers was prosaic instead that prose without eliminating the regular meters of words can have all other qualities of poetry. They wrote elaborate art prose of prose poetry rich in the imaginary complex and adventures in the rhythm. Technical writing has become steadily more specialized, especially in vocabulary. Groups styles have profiled in the 12th century. The novel has drawn on almost every kind of writing and every style, although some novelists still write very formal English. Novelists have made prose in general for more colloquial. The growth of popular newspapers using a limited vocabulary with short sentence in short paragraphs has encouraged a general decline in the use of complex sentence and phrases, made many people suspicious of elaborate style. The brief sentence become the mark of the pa- clear-cut practical style. The new prose adapted itself to the needs of the literary critics, the scientific writer, the political pamphleteer, and is placed in the hands of Darren and his supporters Swift Temple and Halifax. English prose changed and freed from its old sites. Dr. Johnson set out to perform the very texture of the English language. He gave to English prose a definite form and dignity. Many years, the achievement of Hanson, Bouquet, and Gibson marks the end of the formative period of English prose. 19th century prose. The 19th century prose present a curious medley of all sorts and variety. On the one hand, we have the graceful and swinging, artless style of Charles Lamb or Langhorne and the elaborate rhythmic period of De Quenicsiki. On the other, during the latter half of the 19th century, both the traditions, the romantic elaborate prose of De Quenici, Ruskin, Datter, and Swinburne, and the formal classic prose of Landor, Macaulay, Faraday, and Newman appears side by side. It remained for R.L. Stevenson to show how classic simplicity of a style could convey the most poignant suggestion that the heart of the romantic hankered after. From the exam point of view, you can see that 20th century prose, how it is written, it is mostly not at least 75% surety this question may appear for your exam. 20th century prose. So please make a point and mark it as an important. 20th century set up a new understand in prose. See, this is a very important question to understand, and please listen for this. 20th century, I will read it again. 20th century set up a new standard in prose style as the age has been marked with experimentation in every field of art and science. With the general spread of education, at least understand what I am reading just now. Among the masses and the phenomena increases in the regarding public of average intelligence, the demand for light literature grew at an unpredicted speed. The popular literary literacy weekly, weeklies and review of today, such as the Week and Review, the New Statesman, and the London Mercury discuss the literacy, literary, political, and social problems that exercise the man of the public at the moment. Several of the best writers of at the moment, several of the best writers today vow to this kind of popular journalism. Their first step towards their present literary reputation among the best known writers of our time, men like E.V. Lucas, A.G. Gardiner, Chesterton, Barry Bell, Belcon, and J.B. Priestley started their literary career as writer of review and delightful little sketches and easy and essay for the columns of there and similar periodical present day prose. Present present day prose. The present day can be asked for a very short, at least you should know it. What the public wants today is what modern literary artists supply in plenty every day of the week is the entertaining monologue of talented writers that will ably and pleasantly discuss the topic of the times and occupy the minds of men of today. So at least you can see this what in one line sentence, two line sentence, this question can be asked. So please note that as an important part. Okay. Further, you can go through the exercise, write the details historical development of English prose in your own words. Now you can go through this chapter and read it so that what you have understood by this lesson which we have read, so that by your own you have to answer it. By your own means you can write it by your own language, write it in your own words, okay, not the textual language. So please note that it's a very important part to understand. This can be asked as a detailed historical development history of English prose in your own words. Okay, so it's an important question. Further, understanding the prose, book three, textual reading. Dr. Ahmed Khan of Death, Francis Bacon. Okay, this is a poem. Men after the death. Men fears death. See the poem reading. As children fear to go in the dark, and as the natural fear in the children is increased with age, so in their other, certainly the contemplation of death as the wage of the sin and passage to another world is holy and religious. But the fear of it as a tribute due to unto nature is weak. Yet in religious meditation, there is sometimes mixture of vanity and of superstition. You shall read in some of their friars' books of mortification that a man means a mortification should think. Mortification is done on man. Should think with himself what happens, what the pain is if we have but his fingers and pressed or tottered, and hereby imagine what the pains of the death are. Even then, holy body is corrupted and dissolved when man ti- many times death passes with less pains than the terror of limb. For the most vital part are not that quickest sense, and by him and that spake only as a philosopher and a natural man. It was well said, Pompa, Mortis, Magis, Treat, Quam, Morris Ispa, the accompaniment of death, frightened more than death itself. Georgian and Go- Georgians and convulsions and the discolored face and friends weeping and blacks and obsequies that there is no passion in the mind of man so weak but it mates and masters the fears of death. And therefore death is not such terrible enemy when a man has so many attendants about him that can win the combat of him. Revenge, triumph over death, love slights it, honors a spirit to its grief frith to it, fear preoccupy it. May we read after, although the emperor had slain himself pity, which is the tenderest of affection, provoked many of die out of mere accom- ac- compassion of their sovereign and as their truest of followers. Nicency adds Nicence and of followers, satis, cogi- cogita, cogita, gut- gudarium, phrases, mori villain, nutum, phantom fortress, out misses, sid idiom. Fatudius protest a man would die, though he were neither valiant nor miserable, only upon a weariness to do the same thing so oft over and over. It is now no less the approach of that mark, for they appeared to be the same men till the last instant. Augustine Caesar died in compliment. Livilia conjugii nostri memor vivi. Well, farewell, Livia. as long as you live, forgot not the days of our married life. Delirious and dissimulation at tactics set of him, jam tervarium versus echo corpus non dismolishment. His bodily strength was distracting, this Tyberus, but this dismulsion remained was pain in the just setting upon the stool up to Puto view. I think I am becoming a gold galba with a sentence Pharisee ex risi sit populi Romani. Strike if it be for the God of the Roman people, holding forth his neck, Septimius Severus is dispatched. Adesti seguid, mihi restart, arrangement, come quickly if there remains anything for me to do, and like certainly the stasis bestowed too much cost upon death, and by the great preparation made, it appears more fearful. Better saith he, Guaifan, Vito extremi intra murena potnat, nature, who accounts the end of the life as one of the boon nature. It is an natural to die as to born, and to a little infant perhaps the one in as painful as the other. He that dies in an earnest persist in like one that is wounded is not blood, who for the time scarce feels the heart, and therefore a mind fixed and bent upon somewhat that is good both a word, the color of death, but above all believe it, the sweetest canticle, its nukic dimities. None lettest thou thy servant depart. When a man hath obtained worthy ends and expectations, death has his also that it openeth the gate to good fame and envy extinguishes ambition idiom who he who was envied when alive will be loved when dead. Okay, so this is a good part in English. So for before writing the answer on Bacon on death, you have to introduce the Bacon's period when he was born, his period of uh, in which period he wrote this, and what was his style style of writing, then from what period he wrote. Okay, see what does fear book of mortification explains the pain of death. What makes death terrible? What are the attempts of the man that makes his confirmation with death easy? How to stoic stockists make death more terrible? How did good spirit meet death? Who would be remembered and loved when after death? Okay, so there are some difficult words and phrases you can note down and see the meaning for the same in your lesson under the book. So for the further period, some grammar part is there, some match the columns are there, some dual directed questions are there. Okay, if you read go through the summary is also you will come across why summary is there. You can see for the summary so that you will at least know what is the concept of the death poem. Okay, so there are further readings they have given that other essays of Francis Bacon, like there are some good books. You can John Bacon's essays, Macmillan's English classic. You can buy these books. You can get in the bazaar where these lessons and question are there of truth, of unity in religion, of studies, of activity, of friendship, of envy, of love, of anger, of marriage and single life, of beauty, of parents and child. Okay, so can see this is a task they have given. You can go through those tasks and do the work. Unit 2 on the feeling of immortality in youth. On the feeling of the immortality in youth. Life is a pure flame and we live by an invisible sun within us. Thomas Browne. Now young man believes he shall ever die. It was a saying of my brothers and a fine one. There is a feeling of eternity in youth which makes us adapt for envy things. To be young is to be as one of the immortal goods one half of time indeed in flown, the other half remains in stores for us with all its countless treasures, for there is no land drawn, and we see no limit to our hopes and wishes. We make the coming age our own. The vast, unbounded protest lies before us. Death, old age are words without a meaning that passes by us. Link the idle air which we regard not otherwise may have undergone or may still be liable to them. Be cleared a charmed life which loves to scorn all such sickly fancies as in sitting out of a delightful journey. We strain our eager gaze forward, biding the lovely sense at distance hail, and see no end to the landscape new objects presenting themselves. As one advances so in the commencement of life, we set no bounds to our inclination, nor to the unrestricted opportunities of gratifying them. We have as yet found no obstacle, no deposition to flag, and it seems that we can go on so forever. We look round in a new world full of life and motion and ceaseless progress and feel in ourselves all the vigors and spirit to keep space with it and do not proceed from any present symptom how we shall be left behind in the natural course of things, decline into old age and drop into the grave. It is the simplicity and, as it were, abstractness of our feeling is youth that, so to speak, identifies us with nature and our experience being slight and our passion strong. Dildos use in a belief of being immortal like it. Our short-lived connection with existence, we fondly flattered ourselves in an indissoluble and onion, lasting union. Okay, so we will stop over here for today. Thank you for the day. Good day. मोर मध्ये जाऊन एंड करू ना.